We can open up the time for questions. I mean, is there any, we'll start with NMSU questions. Is there any questions from this room? We've got a few people here.
I was curious about the classification technique for the real-time cameras.
Yeah.
That you went to the, did you look at more traditional RGB type classifiers before you went to the hue and saturation?
So
and compare the, you know,
yeah, so I was thinking about how that would work. And I didn't really look into too many RGB classifiers. The reason for that is because I was thinking about how a person would perceive color, and that's a little bit more towards a hue saturation value, where you can see the brightness of an object and the color of it, and also how much of that color is there. And by doing that, I was thinking, well, from the cameras, we do change it to that spectrum. And then that's around the time that I ran into that paper. And I was like, okay, well, there's a study I've done about this, and it was going towards a track that I was following. And I was like, maybe let's try that out and see if we can determine that day and night and see if it applies to dust. And that's kind of how it went off. And it was working to some extent. It would classify a lot of the big dust storms, but then out of nowhere, it would lose it. And then it would just find it again, which was a little strange. And that's where I started thinking about finding the best way to get my thresholds. And then a logistic regression started coming in, and at that point, logistic regression on its own is some sort of machine learning. So then it just started jumping, well, let's just do a neural net into that.
Any more questions from our room? So I guess I've got a question I could ask. Yeah, I know you're early in on some, you know, still working on the analysis tools and the techniques, but can you see a path forward eventually when you have some kind of good correlations with dust and imagery to have something that's a real time, like you have a camera that's cell connected, like one of the traffic cams in MDOT, to classify not only dust, but look for other things, other meteorological factors. Like we had a meeting yesterday, we were talking about microbursts. You know, in a lot of places in the West, there's no radar coverage, or it's insufficient. They look at it high up, but if there's a cameras that kind of be situated remotely at different places outside of the radar areas, do you see any potential uses in that kind of?
Yes. So if the classifier gives appropriate results and we think that it's a good representation of the dust storm being there or not, and regarding to the binary classifier, we could actually, if the camera has internet protocol, we can just get that camera on its own and do a live feed of it. This won't tell us like a forecast prediction, but it will just tell us at that moment if a storm is coming up or not. You can use the Python library, it's OpenCV, and you can just remote to that camera. A lot of people do it with webcams. So you can run a Python program and just start getting live feed, and you can take those individual frames and just put it into the classifier. So once the classifier is built, you can make it static, so it's no longer updating its weight matrix. And from there, it's just going to start classifying no or yes for individual dust storms. So with good results, this could be sent to a live stream and to start being live at the moment. That would be really good. If we do unsupervised, which is something I'm going to look into, is if it starts classifying, dust, precipitation in the winter, snow or hail. If it's able to cluster those individually, then again, the same concept. You can just log into that camera and start getting live feed and start seeing where it starts clustering it. and start using that as a warning for that time.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
thanks. Any other questions from this room? Before we move to maybe we can go to the online. We've got 5 attendees. Well, 4 minus 5 minus 1 in the U of A, or I don't know, there's other folks. I'm not sure where the other folks are. You have any questions? Go ahead.
Dave, Greg was asking, he was in here for a little bit and had to run at the last second there, but, and maybe any of the panelists who might be able to speak to this, but, and maybe you've talked about this in other talks because you guys have been talking about dust a lot, but what this says about seasonality in terms of maybe the scale of dust storms or the intensity of dust storms, or both, what you've learned from that respect?
Yeah, I'll start off, and if maybe, if you guys have any other ideas. So we've had mainly with the cameras. That's sort of our easiest because it was the cheapest way to start off with. Because instruments, they're upwards of $3K for some of the cheapest instruments, and these cameras were a good alternative because they were less than $200 each, and we're actually, Hostway has been paving the way. We're making analytical quantitative data out of these imagery, but we've seen the different years have different number of types of events, and not only the intensity of the drought, how long that lasts and when it starts, I think has a big difference in the dust emission cycle, and then on top of the spring season when we get a lot of troughs coming in, higher wind speeds, more pressure gradients through our area, those are naturally, but then some, then there's effects of, La Niñas and El Niños also have input where they can also change the surface characteristics, which is a very interesting because you're adding soil moisture. If it rains, obviously you have more, you're changing the dynamics of the particle cohesion and things like that. And then you've got monsoon moisture, which also changes things. So there's a lot of different phases that we're seeing, and I think both of the other students here could probably look at the effects of particle size distribution, saltation efficiency during different seasons, and then with your imagery, right? So
so kind of with the second phase of my project with the satellite remote imagery and the rapid update cycles, or that series, if a good classifier is able to come out of that, then that will allow us to just determine not only when the dust storm occurred or finding it, but we can also start looking at the weather data, the day before or in that season, because the spatial range of those imageries is the whole continental United States. We have a good idea of what's going around somewhere else. With hurricane seasons coming up, we start to get a lot of precipitation down here in New Mexico, and that causes storms to come up too. So that's something that I want to be looking at a little bit deeper in, is actually determining the size that I want to start to use. At the beginning, maybe we're going to just start truncating it to the playa. So get the GO satellite imagery and cropping it down to the playa and see if we're able to determine it at a small scale. And then from there, start, scaling up to maybe New Mexico and Arizona, a region there, and then the Southwest, and then scale it up even more to see if we can get a continental United States classification at different areas. And the way that's going to be going is the training data for the convolutional neural networks is just going to be small. Regardless of location, it's just going to be where the dust is present, that based off of either the GOES band 1, 11, or the difference of the other bands, small little pictures of those. And then eventually, when we're trying to determine it at large scales, we're going to just have to submit the photo of the whole continental United States, but we're going to have it segmented and go through each segmentation to see if it finds one there. And then later on, correlate that back to the big map of the continental United States. And my project, the goal is to classify these dust storms so that we can look at the weather patterns and find the precursors and how, try to answer the questions you just asked, seasonal, day and night, weather patterns, if a hurricane happens in the Pacific or Atlantic that we've been seeing, how that could cause dust storms anywhere. And that's what I want to try to accomplish after the classifier is done.
Yeah, that's cool. I think, we have this sense of, monsoon winds and dry out at the end of the spring, and it seems dusty then, but some better sense of kind of when and how would be really helpful. So that's cool.
Yeah, and the rapid update cycle series does a really good job at, explaining what's actually going on. There's a lot of data from wind, temperature, precipitation, soil, humidity, and so it goes off through the whole spectrum. It's a forecasting model. So from there, we can look at the whole area and see how to try to compare, find the precursors for it.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, because I know, Dave, you've talked about this too, but the Picacho region between here and Phoenix, we definitely have some dust events as well. And I don't know if they're in a slightly different nature, but yeah, so very curious. And also the Wilcox Play, of course. But
yeah. And then, so from there, we can look at, the surface variables and going back to what Vito was doing. And we can look at the different areas and how regions also affect it.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. So any other questions from our online participants? And we got one drop off.
Oh, I'm going to try to make this person able to talk. Let me see. There we go. Iyasu, I don't know if I said your name right, but I think you are now able to. I tried unmuting you. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Go ahead, Iyasu. We're not hearing your voice yet. If that doesn't work, is there a way to type it in?
There is a way. There's a chat box as well, Iyasu, that I put a message in. I just sent another.
So if you go on the top menu, right, there's a message. Let's see here. There it is.
Chat.
Do you see chat? Oh, there's it right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was working pretty slick till right now.
Typing in a note. We are able to chat. Yeah, so I'm excited, to see some, more different, different types of monitoring, because the typical monitoring we've done in the past, it's been, putting sensors and collecting particles, which is still the usual type. But I think if we head into other areas, with video, I think that's a very fruitful way of doing things.
Yeah, it seems like it's gone a long way from just simple presence absence, whether it's kind of the characteristic of the soil or looking at the variable intensity you can pick up off imagery. That seems
yeah, that's one of the things is, how much information can we get about the vegetation or the soil moisture? I know we can't get real numbers, but we can get a sense of what it looks like, and then maybe correlate it with, it could be either a binary thing or, a level. I know there's, at some of the conferences I've been to, they've been, analyzing precipitation, identifying hail and snow, determining when snow occurs. And
yeah, I was curious about the lag time too, because if it rained and then because you mentioned, I think I flew back about a week ago and it looked like the Lordsburg Playa still had water on it, but I couldn't quite tell because we were kind of high up in the air. But I imagine as it dries out, you get an increased chance of more events along there as well. But kind
absolutely,
of
yeah,
30 days, 60 days, that sort of thing. So
right, yeah. I mean, that could be very interesting. Is to have the presence or absence of water. Where, and you could have, if you know them geographically, the lat long, you could say it's a data point. You don't know the soil moisture, but you know that there's waters,
right?
Or even the depth. You could probably even get the depth of the water, and then watch it evaporate. Watching water evaporate sounds like you're watching paint dry.
Paint dry, yeah.
Paint dry
Semi-quantitative.
A watch playa doesn't evaporate. Is that stuff?
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's possible that Ayasu didn't mean to click the hands up button and that we scared her off.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, I think, any other questions? I think we're doing
okay.
well.
I'll process the video and get a link sent out to you guys so you can circulate it to your folks as well. I'll just do it through this listserv so you'll see it there. But yeah, thanks for doing this. This was a good test run to make sure this stuff works for us. It seems to work super slick. So in the future, we don't have to do all of our colloquia over here. We can do one over there every once in a while too. So that's cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is our department conference room, and we got the cameras. We can.
Yeah. That works really well. And we're in the paradoxical world where Dan's somewhere in Las Cruces, but he's there for some other project meeting that he couldn't get out of. So I don't know if he's going to connect with you. So.
Yeah, I haven't seen her head or tail of him, so he must be busy.
It's something. I think. Yeah, it's something. He's not the PI on the project, or I don't know who it. Yeah, you may say I don't know. I don't know what he's doing. So I just know he's not here. So okay.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thanks, Ben. I appreciate you getting this started and holding it at your end.
Yeah. This is good. So yeah, we'll be in touch. And thanks for doing this, guys.
You bet.
No problem.
All right. We'll see you again.
Yeah.
Yay.